A lonely rancher arrived. "You need help, and my little girl needs a mother."
The sun had barely risen over the wide open plains when the rancher stepped out of the small, weathered cabin he called home.
The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of earth, grass, and the faint tang of livestock. He paused for a moment, taking in the endless stretch of land that belonged to him, a land both beautiful and merciless. The ranch was a hard life, and the loneliness that came with it pressed on him every day. His little daughter was already awake, her small hands pressing against the window as she watched him from inside. Brace. She waved and he waved back, forcing a small smile even though he felt the weight of the day ahead.
Running the ranch alone was never easy.
Breaths. Feeding the animals, checking fences, inspecting water troughs, and making sure the land itself was not against them. The work was physical, relentless, and unforgiving. He had learned to rise with the sun and rest only when his body allowed. But even when he slept, worry never truly left him. The cattle needed care, the barn needed maintenance, and storms could come suddenly, destroying fences and flooding fields. The land demanded constant attention, and he gave it willingly, but it left little room for anything else. His daughter, a lively little girl with big brown eyes and hair that curled at the ends, followed him wherever she could. She loved the animals and the wide fields, but she also longed for company beyond her father and the occasional visitor who rarely stayed long. Most days she played alone, inventing games among the hay bales or helping in small ways she could manage. She was clever for her age, observing everything her father did and learning from him, but the loneliness in her eyes mirrored the loneliness he felt in his own heart. Breakfast was a quiet affair. They ate in the small kitchen, the morning light spilling across the wooden table. The rancher chopped bread and poured coffee, while his daughter nibbled at toast, talking about small things she noticed outside. A new bird perched on the fence, the way the sunlight fell on the barn roof, or a stray cloud shaped like a horse. He listened, nodding and occasionally smiling, though he longed for conversations with someone who could understand the burdens he carried. The little girl's chatter brought warmth, but it was not enough to fill the silence that settled as soon as she paused, blanning.
After breakfast, the work began in earnest. He walked through the fields, checking fences and gates, making sure the livestock had enough food and water.
The cows looked up as he approached, familiar with his presence, and he called to them softly, moving through the herd with practiced ease. The rancher's hands were strong and calloused, shaped by years of work, and every motion was precise. Yet, no matter how much he accomplished, there was always more to do. There were days when the chores seemed endless, when the land itself seemed determined to test his patience and resolve. His daughter followed at a distance, carrying a small basket to collect eggs from the chickens. She ran ahead occasionally, laughing when a chicken clucked in surprise, but she always returned to him, her eyes bright with curiosity. He watched her, both proud and protective, knowing that the world beyond the ranch could be harsh. He wanted to shield her from everything, but he also wanted her to grow strong, to know how to handle life's challenges. There was a quiet tension in the way he moved through the day, a constant balancing act between teaching and protecting, between work and the small moments of connection he could share with her.
By midday, the sun was high and hot, and the work never seemed to slow.
The rancher mended fences, repaired a broken gate, and tended to a sick calf that had struggled to stand the night before. His daughter watched, offering help when she could, but mostly learning from the way he moved, the careful way he handled animals, and the way he measured every step. There was a rhythm to the ranch, a life defined by routine, sweat, and care. Yet, for all its beauty, it was also a life defined by solitude. Friends were far away, neighbors were few, and the outside world seemed distant and unreachable. The evenings were the hardest. After the day's chores were complete, the rancher sat on the porch, looking over the land as the sun began to dip toward the horizon. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, the colors reflected in the little creek that ran through the property. His daughter sat beside him, leaning against his shoulder, tired but happy from a day of play and work. Brash. They shared stories. Some made up, some remembered from books. But the quiet moments often ended with a longing look toward the horizon. There was a world beyond the ranch, a world full of people, laughter, and life, and both of them felt its absence keenly. Broke. A deep silence, broken only by the sounds of animals settling in for the evening. The rancher lit a small lamp, its warm glow filling the cabin, and prepared a simple dinner for it. His daughter helped set the table, and they ate together, savoring the comfort of food and the company they could provide each other. Yet, even in these moments, he felt the ache of solitude. The ranch was his responsibility, his life's work, but it was also a cage of isolation. He had everything he needed to survive, but not everything he needed to feel truly alive. Before bed, the little girl asked him questions about the stars, about animals, about life beyond the ranch. He answered patiently, telling her stories, explaining things she could understand, and sometimes admitting when he didn't know. She listened intently, her head resting on his arm, and he felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps one day they would find more than this lonely routine. Perhaps someone would come, someone who could share their lives and bring light into their quiet world. Breath. As he tucked her into bed, he glanced around the small cabin, noticing the signs of life and work everywhere. Every tool, every piece of furniture, every animal was part of the story they were living together. Yet, for all its warmth and familiarity, it was missing something, a presence that could turn the cabin into a home, not just a shelter. He felt a quiet determination, a promise to keep going, to protect his daughter, and to continue the life they had built. Sleep finally came, but even in rest his mind wandered. He thought of the ranch, of the endless chores, and of the little girl who depended on him. Breath. He thought of the long days ahead and the hope that someday, somehow, life might change. The loneliness was heavy, but it was tempered by the bond he shared with his daughter, a connection that gave meaning to every hardship. In the vast, quiet night, the ranch stood under the stars, a testament to resilience and care. The father and daughter slept, dreaming of a future where work and struggle might be balanced with love and companionship. They did not yet know that change was coming, that life had a way of bringing unexpected help when it was needed most. For now, they rested together, facing the long road ahead with courage, hope, and an unspoken longing for something more. The next morning dawned bright and warm, the golden sunlight spilling over the wide fields of the ranch. The rancher stepped outside, carrying the usual burden of chores on his shoulders. The little girl ran ahead, chasing a butterfly that fluttered between the tall grass. The morning seemed ordinary, almost routine, yet life had a small surprise waiting for them, though neither of them knew it yet. A dust cloud appeared on the horizon, moving slowly along the long dirt road that led to the ranch. At first, the rancher thought it might be a passing traveler or perhaps a neighboring farmer checking on his land. Desk. As the figure grew closer, he noticed a woman walking steadily, carrying a small bag and wearing a calm, confident expression. She looked around, scanning the wide fields as if seeking someone, and when their eyes met, the rancher felt a sudden mix of curiosity and caution. The little girl, noticing the newcomer before her father, ran toward her.
"Who is she, Papa?" she asked, her small voice filled with wonder.
The rancher stayed where he was, wary. Life on the ranch had taught him to be careful. Visitors were rare, and not all of them came with good intentions. He watched her approach the stranger, unsure whether to call her back. The woman smiled warmly at the child and crouched to greet her, her hands open in a gentle gesture. "Hello there," she said softly. "Are you the little one who lives here?" The girl nodded, her eyes wide with curiosity, and introduced herself. The stranger's smile deepened, and she spoke kindly, asking questions about the animals, the house, and the wide fields around them. The rancher approached slowly, his eyes measuring her, noting the way she carried herself with calmness and competence. Something about her presence felt different, not threatening, not fleeting, but solid. and steady. The woman introduced herself simply, explaining that she had been traveling through the area and had some skills with animals and household work. Breaths. She claimed no particular reason to stay, but her tone carried an offer of help if needed. The rancher felt a flicker of interest, though he kept his guard up. He had lived too long with the isolation of the ranch to trust easily, yet her presence stirred something long dormant, a hope, a sense that perhaps life could change.
She offered to help with small chores first, something safe and practical. The rancher hesitated, unsure whether it was wise to accept.
But the little girl tugged at his hand, her eyes pleading.
Papa, can she stay for just a little while?
Please? Her enthusiasm was impossible to ignore. With a reluctant nod, the rancher agreed, setting boundaries carefully. You can help with chores, he said, but only if you follow my instructions. From that moment, the ranch took on a different rhythm. The woman began by feeding the chickens, carrying water to the animals, and mending a section of fence that had been damaged by a recent storm. Her hands were capable and gentle, and her presence seemed to ease some of the heaviness that had settled over the ranch. The little girl followed her closely, absorbing everything she did, asking questions, and learning new ways to care for the animals. The rancher watched them both from a distance, noting the change in his daughter's mood. For the first time in a long while, she laughed freely, the sound ringing out over the open fields. It was a simple laugh, yet it carried a weight of happiness the rancher had not heard in years. Brask. He realized then how lonely they had truly been, how much his daughter had missed companionship, and how much he himself had craved someone who could understand the quiet struggles of their life.
As the day wore on, the stranger proved herself not just capable but thoughtful.
She noticed small problems around the ranch. The water trough that needed cleaning, the fence post that leaned dangerously, and the barn doors that groaned on their hinges. She worked steadily, without complaint, and even found small ways to make the ranch feel warmer. She swept the kitchen floor, arranged the shelves neatly, and suggested little improvements that made life easier. The rancher found himself observing her silently, realizing that he had been so focused on survival that he had forgotten the small comforts that made a home feel like more than just a shelter. Lunch was simple, but different from what they usually shared. The woman had prepared a few vegetables she carried in her bag and cooked them with skill over the small stove. The little girl helped set the table and watched as the rancher took the first bite. A smile flickered across his face. The food was simple, yet it carried a warmth he had not felt in a long time.
Conversation flowed easily, and even the rancher found himself speaking more than he had with anyone in months.
He learned about the woman's life, about her travels, and about the small joys she found in helping others. In return, he shared stories of the ranch, of the hard work, and of the little girl who was his entire world.
The afternoon brought more work, but it also brought small, meaningful moments. The woman showed the little girl how to properly collect eggs without startling the chickens.
She taught her to recognize the signs of a sick calf and how to help without fear. The little girl's eyes sparkled as she learned, and the rancher noticed how much lighter the day felt with her guidance. For the first time in years, he felt that someone else could share the burden of ranch life, someone who understood the land and the animals and the quiet needs of their small family. Evening came, and with it a sense of peace that had been absent for a long time. The sun dipped low, casting golden light across the fields. The rancher, his daughter, and the newcomer sat on the porch together, watching the colors change in the sky. The little girl leaned against the stranger, feeling safe and happy in a way she had not before. The rancher remained quiet, observing, and feeling a stirring of hope he had almost forgotten. Pest! This woman, a stranger just hours ago, had brought warmth and life into their home without asking for anything in return. As night fell, the wind rustled gently through the trees, and the stars began to appear one by one. Dinner was simple, yet it felt full of meaning. The three of them ate together, sharing stories and laughter, a tiny family forming where there had been only solitude. The rancher noticed how much lighter his heart felt, how the weight of endless chores seemed easier when shared. He realized that the newcomer was not just helping with work. She was helping them feel alive again. After dinner, the little girl asked to hear a story. The woman smiled and began to tell a tale of distant lands, animals, and courage. The rancher listened quietly, feeling a strange sense of relief. For the first time in a long while, the house felt alive, filled with voices and laughter instead of just the quiet sound of work and the wind outside. Desk. He felt a warmth in his chest, a recognition that life could be different, brighter, and more fulfilling. When it was time for bed, the little girl hugged the newcomer tightly. "Will you stay?" she asked. The woman hesitated, then smiled gently. "I will stay for as long as you need me," she said. The rancher standing at the doorway felt a mixture of relief and cautious hope. He still did not know how long she would remain, or what the future would bring. But he recognized that for the first time in years they had a chance for a different life, one that included companionship, guidance, and perhaps even love. Bad night. As the rancher lay in his bed, he thought about the day. The work was still hard, the chores never ending, but the presence of another person had shifted something within him. He realized that survival was no longer enough. They needed more. His daughter needed a motherly figure, someone who could nurture and guide her, and he himself needed a companion, someone who understood the hardships and joys of life on the ranch. Outside, the wind carried the sounds of animals settling for the night, and the stars shone brightly in the wide open sky. The rancher felt a small but significant hope. Life had delivered an unexpected visitor, a person who could change the rhythm of their days, who could bring warmth and care where loneliness had reigned. Bah. He did not know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long time he looked forward to the sunrise with anticipation rather than dread. In the quiet of the night, the little girl slept peacefully, dreaming of the day's adventures and the promise of more to come. The rancher, too, drifted into sleep, carrying a sense of relief and cautious optimism. The ranch was still isolated, the work still demanding, but life had shifted ever so slightly. There was someone to help, someone to care, someone to bring joy and hope into their small world. And in that change, a spark of possibility had been lit, one that would grow slowly, gently, into something lasting and beautiful. Days turned into weeks, and the presence of the woman on the ranch became a steady rhythm in their lives. Morning light still spilled over the wide fields, but now the rancher no longer faced the day alone. The little girl bounced out of bed each morning, eager to see the newcomer, her laughter echoing across the barnyard. The rancher watched her from a distance, feeling a strange mixture of relief and wonder. It was as if the ranch, once silent and heavy with loneliness, had begun to hum with life. Each day brought new tasks, and the woman proved herself invaluable. She mended fences with the precision of someone who had done it countless times, fed the livestock carefully, and even taught the little girl how to keep the barn organized. The rancher observed, impressed, though he rarely spoke of it. He was not a man to offer praise easily, yet inside, he felt a deep gratitude. His daughter thrived under her guidance, learning not just about chores, but about patience, care, and the small joys hidden in everyday work. The little girl's laughter became a constant soundtrack, ringing across the fields as she ran alongside the newcomer, carrying baskets of eggs or helping feed the animals. Bah. She learned quickly, mimicking the woman's careful movements, and sometimes even correcting herself when she made a mistake. The rancher would watch silently, a small smile tugging at his lips, realizing that his daughter had begun to blossom in ways he had never imagined possible. Bah. She was growing confident, strong, and happy, a transformation he had long hoped for but had been unable to achieve alone. Afternoons were often spent together in the open fields, checking fences or guiding the herd. The woman's presence made the work lighter, not just physically but emotionally. She had a way of noticing the small problems before they became big ones, of suggesting solutions gently, without criticism. The rancher, usually stubborn and self-reliant, found himself listening to her advice and following it. Slowly, he began to trust her judgment, realizing that she had not only come to help with the work, but to improve their lives. Meals became moments of warmth and connection. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner were no longer hurried and silent affairs. The three of them ate together, sharing stories and laughter. The woman had a knack for storytelling, weaving simple tales that captivated the little girl, who hung on every word. The rancher found himself relaxing, letting down the walls he had built over years of isolation. He began to share stories of his own childhood, the history of the ranch, and small anecdotes about the animals. The first time in a long while, conversation flowed naturally, and the house felt alive. One afternoon, a small crisis arose. A calf had gotten itself tangled in some fencing, struggling to free its legs. The little girl ran to fetch the woman, her small voice calling for help. The rancher followed quickly, worry etched across his face. Together they carefully freed the calf, using gentle hands and calm voices to soothe it. The rancher noticed how the woman instinctively knew what to do, guiding him with quiet confidence. When the calf finally stood and trotted away, the little girl hugged the woman tightly, laughing with relief and delight. The rancher, too, felt a swell of gratitude. Her presence had saved them not just work and worry, but also taught his daughter courage and compassion. Evenings became moments of reflection and quiet bonding. The three of them would sit on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The little girl would lean against the newcomer, asking questions about stars, animals, and faraway places. The rancher listened quietly, often silent but deeply observant. He noticed the way his daughter's eyes lit up when she learned something new, the way her smile grew wider with each passing day. And he noticed, with a growing awareness, the subtle changes within himself, the weight of loneliness slowly lifting, replaced by a cautious but undeniable hope. One evening, as the sky blushed with the colors of sunset, the rancher found himself speaking more than usual. He told stories of his life before the ranch, of dreams that had been set aside, and of the hardships he had faced raising his daughter alone. The woman listened patiently, never interrupting, her presence steady and comforting. It was a rare experience for him to share so openly, and he realized that he trusted her in ways he had trusted no one for years. Her calm understanding gave him courage to acknowledge feelings he had long buried: gratitude, admiration, and a quiet longing for companionship. The little girl, oblivious to the weight of adult emotions, continued to play and ask questions, her innocence bringing light into every corner of the ranch. She would often tug at the newcomer's hand, insisting on showing her the animals or helping with chores. The woman responded with patience and warmth, never rushing, always encouraging. The rancher watched this interaction with a mixture of awe and relief. His daughter was learning not just skills, but the value of kindness, patience, and trust.
Over time, the rancher began to rely on the woman for more than just work.
He sought her opinion on decisions about the land, the animals, and even the small improvements to the house. He realized that he had spent years making decisions alone, weighed down by isolation, and now he felt the ease of sharing responsibility. Her presence did not diminish him. Instead, it complemented his strengths, balanced his weaknesses, and brought a harmony to their daily lives that had been absent for far too long. The little girl noticed the changes too, but she would often smile at her father, noticing the lighter step in his walk, the softer expression on his face, and the rare moments when he laughed freely. She understood, in her childlike way, that something wonderful was happening. Their home was becoming a place of joy, warmth, and care, and the woman who had arrived unexpectedly was at the center of this transformation. As the weeks continued, small traditions began to form. The three of them would gather around the fireplace in the evenings, sharing stories, songs, and dreams. The little girl learned to help cook simple meals, to care for the animals, and even to plant seeds in the garden. The rancher, who had once felt the weight of endless responsibility alone, now found joy in watching his daughter grow and thrive under the guidance of the newcomer. Each day brought new lessons, laughter, and a sense of purpose that went beyond mere survival. One morning, after a week of heavy rain, the rancher stood outside surveying the damage. Fallen branches littered the fields, and the mud had made chores more difficult than usual. Yet he did not feel the usual dread. The woman stood beside him, ready to help, her presence steady and reliable. Together they worked through the mess, repairing fences, moving animals to safe areas, and cleaning the barn. The little girl joined in, her small hands busy but determined, and the rancher realized how far they had come. The work was still hard, but it was no longer a burden carried alone. It was shared, and that made all the difference. Evenings became quieter, more reflective, as the three of them settled into a rhythm of life that balanced work and connection. The little girl would cuddle close to the newcomer while the rancher tended to small chores, or they would all sit together under the stars, talking about the future, dreams, and hopes. The rancher felt a sense of completeness he had not known was possible. He understood that life on the ranch would always be hard, but now it was filled with laughter, learning, and a sense of shared purpose that brought meaning to every day.
One night, as the fire crackled in the hearth, the little girl asked the newcomer why she had come to stay.
The woman smiled gently, explaining that she had felt drawn to their small family, that she had wanted to help and to be part of something meaningful. Great. The rancher listened quietly, feeling the truth of her words resonate deeply. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to hope. Not just for help, but for love, companionship, and the warmth of family life. As the night deepened, the rancher stood outside for a moment, looking up at the stars. The land stretched endlessly before him, but it no longer felt lonely. The work remained, the chores awaited, but he no longer faced them alone. His daughter thrived, the woman had become a central part of their lives, and the ranch, once a place of isolation, was now a place of learning, laughter, and connection. In the quiet hours, the rancher understood something important. Life did not have to be endured alone. The bonds they had formed were strong, built on trust, care, and shared experience. The little girl had found a motherly presence. He had found a companion, and together, they had begun to build a new rhythm of life. Each day brought challenges, yes, but also joy, warmth, and hope. The future was uncertain, as it always was, but it was now shared, and that made all the difference. Sleep came that night with a sense of peace. The little girl dreamed peacefully in her bed, the rancher slept with a lighter heart. And the woman too rested, knowing she had found a place where she was needed and valued. The ranch, bathed in moonlight, stood as a testament to resilience, hope, and the quiet, enduring power of connection. The lonely days were not gone entirely, but they had been replaced with something far more precious. The promise of a family, a shared life, and a future filled with possibilities. Evenings on the ranch had taken on a new kind of quiet. The chores were done, the animals settled, and the sun dipped low, painting the fields in soft gold. The rancher sat on the porch, the little girl beside him, her small hands clutching a worn stuffed toy. The newcomer had stepped inside to prepare dinner, the aroma of fresh bread and roasted vegetables drifting from the cabin. The rancher watched the sky, letting the calm of the moment settle over him. Though his mind was full of thoughts he rarely allowed himself to voice, but for years he had carried everything alone. The ranch, the animals, the little girl, all had been his responsibility, and he had shouldered it, without complaint, without expecting help. But now, with her presence, he felt a shift inside himself. There was relief in having someone to share the burdens of the day. Someone whose hands were steady, whose heart was kind, and whose understanding seemed almost instinctive. But there was something more stirring in him, something deeper and more fragile. The realization that he could let someone in, not just to help, but to care for his family in a way he could not manage alone. The little girl leaned against him, sensing the quiet in his mind. "Papa," she said softly, her voice breaking the silence. "Do you think she likes us?" Her eyes searched his face, earnest and full of hope. The rancher smiled, brushing a stray curl from her forehead. "I think she does," he replied, "and I think she belongs here with us, at least for now." He felt the weight of the words, knowing that admitting such thoughts was a rare thing for him. For so long his life had been defined by solitude, by doing everything himself. And now he was beginning to understand that allowing someone else in did not make him weak, it made life better. When the woman returned with dinner, she found the rancher and his daughter sitting together on the porch. The little girl jumped up to help carry the plates inside, and the rancher followed, feeling a strange warmth at the sight of her happy energy. Dinner was a comfortable affair, filled with laughter, small stories, and quiet moments of shared understanding. The rancher found himself speaking more than he usually did, recounting small stories from the ranch, from his childhood, and even from the little adventures he had shared with his daughter before she could remember them fully. After the meal, the woman suggested they sit outside for a while to watch the stars come out. The three of them settled on the porch, blankets draped over their laps as the temperature cooled. The little girl leaned against the newcomer, her small hands entwined with hers, while the rancher took a seat beside them, feeling a closeness that had been missing for so long. The night was calm, and the sky was dotted with stars, each one shining like a tiny promise. The rancher found his voice breaking the silence, speaking softly. "You know," he began, "I've been running this ranch alone for years. Every day, every chore, every worry, it's always been just me. And my daughter, of course. But even with her, I felt lonely." He paused, unsure if he should continue. The woman looked at him with gentle patience, encouraging him without words. The little girl, sensing something important, sat quietly, her eyes wide and attentive. "Bespis. I never thought someone would come along and help in more ways than one," he continued. "You've brought a kind of light here that I didn't know we were missing." "I've been so focused on surviving, on keeping the ranch running, that I forgot what it meant to really live, to have someone care in the same way we care for this land, for these animals, for each other." His words trembled slightly, vulnerable and honest in a way he had never spoken aloud. The woman reached out, placing her hand over his. "You've been doing an incredible job," she said softly. "Raising a child alone, managing this ranch, it's not easy. But it's clear how much love and dedication you have, and I've come to care for both of you. Not just to help with work, but because I see the life you're trying to create here. It matters to me." Her voice was calm, steady, and full of sincerity. The little girl smiled, sensing the emotion in their voices. "Bert, does that mean you'll stay?" she asked, a small hope shining in her eyes. The woman nodded, giving her a gentle hug. "I will stay as long as you both want me to." The rancher felt a weight lift from his chest, realizing that this simple affirmation was more powerful than any promise he had hoped for. For the first time, he allowed himself to imagine a future where he was not alone, where his daughter had a motherly presence to guide her, and where he could share his burdens freely. That night, the rancher and the woman spoke for hours under the stars. They shared memories, fears, and hopes. He admitted the fear he had carried for so long, that he might not be enough for his daughter, that he might fail her in ways he could not control. She listened with compassion, never interrupting, offering comfort not through words alone but through her presence, her understanding, and her patience. Breath. He felt something he had not felt in years, the relief of being seen, of being understood, and of being accepted without judgment. The little girl eventually fell asleep, her small body curled against the newcomer. The rancher stayed awake for a while, watching them, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. He understood, in a way he could not fully express, that this was a turning point. Desk. Life on the ranch would always be demanding, always filled with work and challenges, but the presence of another caring adult had changed everything. There was now hope, laughter, and warmth in every corner of their home. Over the next few days, the rancher noticed subtle changes in himself. He found himself smiling more easily, laughing at his daughter's playful antics, and feeling lighter when he walked through the fields. He began to rely on the woman for more than just help with chores. He sought her advice on decisions about the land, the animals, and even small improvements to the house. Each day brought new evidence that trust could be shared, that life could be richer when burdens were lifted together, and that love could grow in unexpected ways. One afternoon, while repairing a fence damaged by a recent windstorm, the rancher paused to watch the woman and his daughter working together. The little girl mimicked her movements, laughing when she struggled and celebrating small successes. The woman guided her patiently, her hands steady, her voice encouraging. The rancher felt a profound sense of relief and happiness. His daughter was learning, growing, and thriving, and he realized that this bond, the one forming between the newcomer and his daughter, was exactly what he had hoped for, even if he had never admitted it before. That evening, as the sun set behind the hills, the three of them gathered on the porch again. The little girl leaned against the woman, tired from the day's work, but content. The rancher sat beside them, feeling a quiet sense of peace. He realized that this connection, this family, was the life he had been searching for all along. The work would continue, the challenges would remain, but now they were shared, and that made every burden lighter.
He turned to the woman, taking a deep breath, and spoke the words he had held inside for so long.
"You know, you've changed our lives," he said quietly. "I never thought someone could make this place feel like home, make my daughter feel safe and loved in a way I couldn't do alone. And I never realized how much I needed that, too. You're not just helping with work. You're helping with our hearts." His voice was steady, but his eyes glistened with emotion. The woman smiled, reaching out to hold his hand. "We've all changed," she said softly. "The three of us. We're building something together. You've done so much already, and now we can do it together. You don't have to carry everything alone anymore." Her words filled the quiet night, offering reassurance and hope that was almost tangible. The little girl stirred in her sleep, murmuring something about stars and animals, and the rancher felt a sense of completeness he had never known. This was more than help. This was family. This was love forming in the small, quiet moments of life on the ranch, in laughter, shared work, and the care they showed each other every day. That night, the rancher lay in bed thinking about the journey they had begun together. The loneliness he had carried for so long had not vanished entirely, but it had been replaced with something stronger and more enduring. Hope, trust, and the knowledge that he was no longer alone. He drifted into sleep with a sense of peace, dreaming not just of chores and cattle, but of a life filled with connection, warmth, and the promise of love and family. Morning came gently over the ranch, the golden sunlight spilling across the fields, illuminating the barn, the fences, and the rolling hills beyond. The air was crisp but not harsh, carrying the earthy scent of grass, soil, and animals waking to a new day. The rancher stepped outside first, taking a deep breath as he surveyed the land that had been his responsibility for so long. But unlike in the past, the heaviness that usually weighed on him was not there. Now,
There was a sense of calm, a quiet happiness that he had not known for years. His little daughter was already awake, skipping around the yard as the chickens clucked and the cows moved slowly to the pasture. She ran toward the woman who had been preparing breakfast in the small kitchen and threw her arms around her. "Good morning!" she exclaimed, her small voice full of joy. The woman hugged her back tightly, smiling warmly, and the rancher watched with a swelling heart. This simple scene, so ordinary, yet so full of life, felt like a miracle. For the first time, his little family was complete in a way he had never imagined possible. Breakfast was a lively affair. The table was filled with fresh bread, eggs collected from the chickens, and warm milk straight from the cows. The little girl chattered endlessly about the plans for the day, asking questions about the animals, the garden, and the chores. The woman guided her gently, showing her how to feed the animals carefully, check fences for damage, and tend to the small garden plot where vegetables were beginning to sprout. The rancher joined in, his hands busy but his heart light, feeling a sense of teamwork and harmony he had never known when he was alone. After breakfast, the trio moved to the barn to begin the day's work. The woman helped the little girl carry buckets of feed, teaching her to be careful not to spill. The rancher repaired a broken gate, but with guidance and support from the woman, the work went faster and more smoothly than it ever had before. They laughed together when a chicken startled the little girl, and when the calf tried to nip playfully at her boots, she shrieked and giggled, her laughter filling the barn and spilling outside into the morning sunlight. The rancher paused for a moment, watching them, and realized just how much their lives had changed. The loneliness he had carried for so long had been replaced with warmth, laughter, and love. The days followed a rhythm that was both familiar and new. Chores were still demanding, storms still tested the fences and the land, but the work was lighter because it was shared. The woman guided the little girl in tasks both practical and nurturing, teaching her patience, care, and responsibility. The rancher observed quietly, occasionally offering a word of advice or encouragement, but most of the time he simply watched, feeling proud of how his daughter had grown and how the bond between them had deepened.
Together, they were no longer just surviving, they were thriving.
In the afternoons, when the sun was high and the air warm, the trio often went for walks across the fields, checking the fences, looking after the livestock, and enjoying the beauty of the land. But the little girl asked questions about everything she saw. The way the wind moved the grass, the shapes of clouds, and the calls of distant birds. The woman explained patiently, teaching her both practical skills and the wonder of nature. The rancher listened, adding stories of his own childhood on the ranch, and he realized that these shared moments were more valuable than any task or chore. They were building memories, laughter, and trust that would last a lifetime. Evenings became special in a way that made the ranch feel more like home than ever before. After dinner, the three of them would sit on the porch, watching the sunset spill golden and pink across the fields. The little girl would lean against the woman, asking her to tell stories, while the rancher sat close, enjoying the warmth and comfort of their shared presence. Sometimes they simply sat in silence, listening to the sounds of the ranch at dusk, the soft calls of animals, the rustling of the trees, and the faint hum of wind across the open land. These quiet moments were as important as the work, as essential as the laughter and learning. They were a reminder that life, even in its hardships, could be filled with peace and joy. The rancher noticed a change within himself that went deeper than just relief from the work. He felt a sense of gratitude and contentment that he had not experienced in years. He realized that the love and guidance the woman brought to his daughter had also nourished his own heart. Her presence reminded him that he did not have to carry the weight of the world alone, that it was possible to build a life filled with connection, support, and care. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to hope, not just for survival or success, but for happiness, love, and the joy of a complete family. One afternoon, a small challenge tested the trio's growing bond. A storm had blown through the night, leaving branches fallen and parts of the fence damaged. The animals were restless, and the little girl worried about the safety of the calves. Together, the rancher and the woman organized repairs while the little girl helped in her own small ways, collecting smaller branches, holding tools, and learning the value of teamwork. The storm that might have once been overwhelming now became an opportunity for cooperation, teaching the little girl resilience and demonstrating the strength of their shared life. By evening, the ranch was restored, the animals were calm, and the trio sat together exhausted but proud. As the weeks passed, traditions began to form. They celebrated small victories, the first sprouts of the garden, the successful birth of a calf, or a week without injuries or accidents. The little girl loved these moments most, especially when the woman allowed her to help cook a celebratory meal or create a handmade gift for the rancher. The rancher felt the depth of connection grow stronger each day. He knew that this woman, who had arrived as a stranger, was now the heart of their home. She brought joy, order, and love, and in return, they had given her trust, care, and family. One evening, the rancher took a moment to reflect while watching the sun set. The colors reflected across the barn roof and fields, the little girl laughing as she chased a stray butterfly, and the woman guiding her, gently with a smile.
He realized how much life had changed since her arrival.
The isolation that had once defined their days had been replaced with warmth, shared responsibility, and the comfort of companionship. Their home was no longer just a place of work. It was a place of love, laughter, and hope. The little girl, sensing her father's contemplative mood, ran up to him and grabbed his hand.
"Papa, do you think she'll always be with us?" she asked.
The rancher smiled down at her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Yes," he said, softly.
"She's part of our family now, and our family is stronger because we're together."
The little girl hugged him tightly, and he felt a deep satisfaction in knowing that she felt safe, loved, and cherished in a way that only family can provide. As the day faded into night, the rancher, the woman, and the little girl sat by the fireplace inside the cabin. The fire crackled, casting a warm glow on their faces. They shared stories, laughed at small mistakes from the day, and planned for the weeks ahead. The rancher realized that life was still full of work, that the ranch would always demand attention, but it no longer felt overwhelming. With companionship, love, and shared responsibility, even the hardest days were lighter. Sleep came peacefully that night. The little girl dreamed happily in her bed. The woman slept nearby, content in her role within their new family, and the rancher lay awake for a moment, listening to the quiet house and the gentle rhythm of their breathing. Brace. He understood that the loneliness of the past was gone, replaced by a life of meaning, connection, and love. They were a family, bound not just by circumstance, but by care, trust, and shared experience. In the following weeks, life on the ranch continued to flourish. The animals thrived under careful attention. The land was managed with skill and care, and the little girl grew stronger, wiser, and happier each day. The rancher found joy in teaching her, in working alongside the woman, and in watching the small miracles of daily life unfold. Every sunrise brought new possibilities. Every chore became a shared adventure, and every evening was a moment of reflection and gratitude. Through seasons of sun, rain, and wind, the trio faced challenges together. There were days when the work seemed endless, when storms threatened fences and fields, or when sickness affected the livestock. Yet through every difficulty, they leaned on one another. The rancher no longer carried burdens alone. The woman provided guidance, care, and partnership, and the little girl contributed courage, curiosity, and joy. Together they faced life as a family, proving that love and teamwork could transform even the hardest circumstances into a life full of warmth and fulfillment. The ranch, once a place of isolation, now felt alive with laughter, learning, and hope. The little girl's happiness was infectious, spreading warmth throughout the cabin, the barn, and the fields. The rancher felt a deep sense of accomplishment not just in the work of the land, but in building a home and family filled with love. And the woman, who had come as a visitor, had become the heart of their life, a mother figure, companion, and friend. As the sun set each evening, painting the sky in colors too beautiful for words, the three of them would gather on the porch, sharing stories, dreams, and quiet moments of connection. The rancher often reflected on how life had changed, from loneliness and struggle to hope, warmth, and family. He realized that the journey had been long and challenging, but the reward was far greater than he could have imagined. Together, they had built not just a home, but a life filled with love, laughter, and enduring companionship. In the quiet night, with the stars shining brightly above the wide fields, the rancher understood the truth he had long sought. Life was not meant to be faced alone. With love, trust, and care, even the hardest challenges could be met with strength and courage. Their family, small but complete, had found a rhythm of life that balanced work, joy, and connection. And in that balance, they discovered something timeless and priceless: the happiness that comes from being truly together.